All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session on what's new in AI. We thought this might be a good time to get together and talk about some of the things that have been announced, released, and updated this summer to energize us as we move into the fall semester. Uh, Amanda's driving, so we're going to do lots of next slide, please. I'm Stephanie Richter. I'm the Director of Teaching Excellence and Support here with the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. And Amanda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Amanda Hirsch, and I'm the Assistant Director of Teaching Excellence and Support with CITL.
And again, we're really excited to have you here today. Next slide, please. So as a quick overview, we will be looking today at a couple of AI frameworks that can help you conceptualize how you incorporate AI in your teaching. We want you to be aware of some new generative AI tools or capabilities that were released this summer or made available to you this summer. And then we know what's top of your mind right now is getting your syllabi done and getting ready for this fall semester. So we will talk about how you might go about creating a generative AI policy for your course and share a wealth of generative AI resources before you go so that you can carry on learning more and continue exploring the topic. So Amanda, next slide. All right, I'm going to start off with some AI frameworks. There are a wide variety of these out there. These are a few that were notable that we came across this summer that we thought we would share so that you can use these in your own teaching as you're, again, conceptualizing how you integrate AI in your classes. So we'll start with the first one. There we are. So this new AI literacy framework was announced this summer, was published this summer. I'll pull up a link to that here in a moment. But I like this one because it is a fairly straightforward framework that I think is easy to understand. It's very similar to Bloom's taxonomy and divides AI literacy into four different types of literacy, really, four different levels of understanding. I have put for those of you joining us live, I've put the link into the chat for you if you'd like to explore this one further. But let's go through and we'll talk through each of these four levels from understanding to creating and what this might look like in a course. Next slide. So the first level is understanding AI. This is the sort of the foundation knowledge that students need in order to do things that are more advanced with AI. At this level, you would expect students to define terms, maybe understand in a broad sense how generative AI tools function, and differentiate certainly generative AI from other forms of AI. So there are a couple of key concepts that you might highlight with students. And of course, a few tools that you might jump into with students and work with them as they work to understand AI and what it really is as a category of tools and how it's beginning to permeate all of our tools and as opposed to being relegated to these standalone systems. Next slide. At the next level of AI literacy or AI competency, you might ask students to really use and apply AI in productive and effective ways. So at this stage, students would be utilizing generative AI tools. They would be experimenting with and improving their prompting techniques. As we know, prompting is really the crux of working with generative AI, being able to write and craft a prompt that results in the output that you were looking for. Students would also at this stage be critical of the output that AI provides and understand and look for the potential hallucinations, bias, or flaws in reasoning that generative AI can succumb to. Yeah, I think that's good for this stage. Let's go to the next slide. At the analyze and evaluate level, we're really looking at a broader criticism of AI and critique, I guess is probably the better term here, but looking at AI from an ethical consideration, looking at the impact that AI has on a wide variety of lenses that we might use to look at our world. So, for example, looking at AI in terms of its impact on environmental sustainability or on labor and what it means to work, what it means um, to for copyright, for example, what does it mean for something that is not a human to create? So at this level, we're really looking not just at the use of it, but understanding and evaluating what impact AI has on our discipline and our world more broadly. And then at the top level, on the next slide, the level of creating AI is the point at which students might be conceptualizing new ideas or structures that relate to AI. So this might be novel uses for artificial intelligence, building software that leverages artificial intelligence, or writing and proposing theories or frameworks, applying those to their disciplines as well. At this stage, very few of our students are probably going to reach to creating AI, at least from a technical perspective. But again, those tools are rapidly changing every day, and we continue to learn more and leverage more at that higher level as well. Just like Bloom's taxonomy, it isn't necessary to move in a strict progression through these 4 levels, but clearly at the higher level, the lower levels are relevant and are helpful for achieving those goals. So you might jump in with students at the use and apply, but have to incorporate some of the understand concepts at the same time so that students have a level playing field and can be really successful in how they use AI. This, as with all frameworks and models, is just another tool for understanding how you are incorporating AI. The other model that I wanted to point out and discuss today is the Gen AI intent and orientation model. And this one really is a model that's intended to describe the different uses of AI in the educational context. So this one starts with dividing our intent and orientation on 2 different axes and looking at how the intent, the use of the AI is then oriented toward the other party in this dichotomy. So we're looking at the instructor and the student as the 2 sides of either being on the intent, the use, or the orientation, the receiving end of the AI. And so by looking at this in a matrix, we can divide this into uses where the instructor is using AI themselves for their own use, the instructor proxy, where the instructor uses AI to work with students instead of themselves, the learner proxy, where student uses the AI to generate something to communicate back with the instructor, or the learning assistant, where the student uses an AI tool independently for their own learning. So let's go to the next slide. We'll look at each of these in a little more detail too. So for the instructor assistant, just some examples of what this might look like. So this might be, for example, an instructor prompting a generative AI tool, asking for examples of discussions, activities, learning objectives that they might use in their own courses. So this is at the design stage, for example, where you might be creating materials for your own course and looking to generative AI for inspiration or for some alternatives, some new ideas. So really looking at how it assists you. Later, we'll talk about the Blackboard Design Assistant, and I think it fits really well right now into this instructor assistant category. In the instructor proxy model, you might create a prompt for students to use that mimics a tutor or an intelligent agent working with them to ask questions to prompt them on their understanding, to dig deeper to their understanding, to find any gaps or misunderstanding in what they know. So with a prompt like the one that's on the slide here, then students would put this into an AI tool of their choice, and that generative AI tool would respond back to their understanding of a topic by digging into more questions. The same thing you might do in class if a student answers a question that you had, or participates in a discussion and they either give a really shallow answer, a very simple answer to a complex question that you want to dig into, or they've shared something that maybe doesn't meet your expectations, might be a wrong answer, might be just an unexpected answer, and you want to unpack that more and have them elaborate on their thinking. This is what an instructor proxy could do. There are tools that are pre-built that will do this either on specific topics or based on specific content, but you can actually have students do the same thing with any AI tool by giving them a well-constructed prompt that they could then interact with. Next slide. So then the other two aspects of this framework start from the learner's perspective. So for the learner proxy, the student would be the one using the generative AI tool in order to generate something that they would give to you. I think this is where concerns around our academic integrity come in, but in this example, this is a more of the student looking for some guidance on language, on the formality appropriate to an email to their instructor. And so they can use AI in that regard to help them get started and to help them communicate their thoughts or their needs more clearly. And then on the learner assistant side, the students themselves can use the AI independently to brainstorm, to develop their own learning tools, and to help them get started on or receive feedback about the work that they've been doing. Before we move on, let me give you a quick link to this article as well on these generative AI intent and orientation model. Excellent. Next slide, Amanda. So then we can expand upon this even further. So this started from the same generative AI framework, but grew from there. So based on that AI intent and orientation model, some researchers at the University of Illinois Chicago started building their own tool that they call the AI Framework, Instructional Framework Explorer. This is a web-based tool where you can request, put in a little bit of information about your course, usually just the title or the topic is enough to get started. And then based on this matrix of involving not only in the first one, a human instructor and a human student, but this 4x4 matrix adds in the ideas of having the AI student or the AI instructor as well. And so it can develop strategies or suggest strategies that you might use for any of the squares that ended up with, or rectangles ended up with icons. So for example, I could request and get some inspiration for how a human student might work with an AI student in an informal, adaptive instruction, kind of almost peer feedback approach. I chose, and I wanted to dig into further the human student working with that AI instructor. But again, any of the ones with icons on this matrix are areas where the AI Explorer could give you more ideas. I'll put the link here in the chat because I know you're going to want to go play around with it. But Amanda, if you'll go to the next slide, I have an example for what this might look like. So this, I focused again on that instructor to learner. In the original model, this was the instructor proxy. In this expanded model, they're calling this adaptive instruction. And so the AI Explorer integrates with an AI tool called Perplexity, just another generative AI chat tool. And the AI Explorer generates this prompt based on, I told them I was teaching educational program evaluation. So the prompt asks the AI to select a random topic that students find challenging in that course, and then use this Feynman questioning technique to then act as an intelligent tutor, starting with a brief explanation, asking me to explain the concept, posing specific thought-provoking questions, and identifying any gaps in my explanation that I give as a student so that they can ask follow-up questions and continue that probing. So on the right then are the responses that Perplexity generated to that prompt. So you can see at the top, it chose a random topic. In this case, it chose logic models, which I can tell you from having taught this course is absolutely one of the topics that students struggle with, and gave a brief explanation. It doesn't perfectly align with what I have in my textbook or my resources for the course, but it reinforces those same concepts, which is great for students to see a different perspective. And then it asked some really insightful, challenging questions. First, just asked the student to explain the concept back in their own words, and then probed further by asking how a logic model identifies potential challenges in a program, which is one of the reasons why we create logic models. So this conversation then becomes a discussion between the student and the AI, where the student is one providing the answers, and the AI is the entity here asking those probing questions. So the students all get questions at their level based on their original understanding when they explained that concept back to the AI. So this is one example of the AI Explorer prompts that it can recommend. There, of course, are different prompts and different suggested activities based on which area of that matrix you wanted to take a look at. I think that's the end then of looking at those frameworks. Those are three that I wanted to at least put out in front of you. The AI literacy, the intent and orientation, and then the explorer for that intent and orientation that can help you think of new ways you might use AI in your courses. And so now I'll turn over to Amanda, who can talk about some of the updates to some of the generative AI tools this summer.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the most recent advancements in AI technology. We'll focus on some tools that are reshaping how we create, analyze, and interact with digital content. So the tools we'll talk about today are these 7 tools: OpenAI's GPT-40, Claude Sonnet 3.5, Pi AI, and Goblin Tools at the top, and then NIU supported AI tools, Microsoft CoPilot, Adobe Creative Cloud and Express, and Blackboard AI Design Assistant. And Stephanie can chime in with some more information on the NIU supported ones when we get to those. So we'll start with OpenAI's GTP40, released on May 13th, 2024. The O stands for Omni, which means of all things, which is supposed to reflect its versatile capabilities. It's freely accessible via web, mobile apps, with some limitations. It can also handle multiple input types, including text, audio, image, and video. It can generate text, audio, and image outputs. A key feature is its ability to conduct internet searches and provide sources, enhancing its utility for research and fact-checking. And there is a demo video here that I'm going to show you. All right, so here is the demo.
I invited myself and my son Imran here to try out some of their new technology. And so we're curious about how good it might be at tutoring someone in math on Khan Academy. So let's get it started. It's loading up. All right, make sure it can see our screen.
Actually, in this format,
hello there. I'm here with my son, and I'd love you to tutor him on this math problem. But don't give him the answer. You can ask questions and nudge him in the right direction, but I really want to make sure he understands it himself. And he's here in the room, so you can talk to him directly.
Of course, I'd be happy to help. Let's look at the problem together. Can you first identify which sides of the triangle are the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse relative to angle alpha?
All right, so I'm pretty sure this is the angle alpha right here, right?
Perfect. That's correct. Now, looking at the triangle, which side do you think is the hypotenuse?
Really,
Remember the hypotenuse?
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be this one, but I really am not sure. This side AC.
You're close. Actually, side AC is called the adjacent side to the angle alpha. The hypotenuse is the longest side of a right triangle and is directly opposite the right angle. Can you find which one is the hypotenuse?
Oh, okay, I see. So I think the hypotenuse is this really long side from A to B. Would that be correct?
Exactly. Well done. Now that you've identified the hypotenuse, can you identify which side is the opposite side to angle alpha?
Okay, well, I mean, you told me earlier that this was the adjacent side, and I know that's the hypotenuse, so I'm guessing that this side, BC, is the opposite side.
Great deduction. That's absolutely correct. Now that you've identified all the sides relative to angle alpha, do you remember the formula for finding the sine of an angle in a right triangle?
Yeah, I know that the sine is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse.
Perfect. That's absolutely right. Now, can you apply that formula to find sine alpha in the triangle using the lengths of the sides that we've identified?
Okay, so, I mean, you told me that 7, this side BC, is the opposite side. And then you said that the hypotenuse is the longest side, so that would be this side AB, which is 25. So would the answer be 7 over 25?
Excellent work. That's correct. Sine alpha equals 7 over 25. You did a great job identifying the sides and using the sine formula. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask.
Okay. Let me just pop back into our PowerPoint. The next one that we'll talk about is Claude Sonnet 3.5. That was released on June 20th. It's free to use on the web and mobile platforms. It does have daily message limits. Anthropic, the parent company, claims it's their most intelligent model yet, excelling in knowledge, reasoning, and writing tasks. And by intelligent, they mean that it's faster, it knows more based on undergraduate level knowledge benchmarks, it codes better, it performs math problem solving more effectively, and it writes more naturally. It accepts text, images, and file uploads as input, but it only generates text output. And unlike GPT-40, it cannot perform internet searches because it's designed to be self-contained. Pi AI was released in March, and it's notable for being the first quote-unquote emotionally intelligent AI. And it's designed to respond empathetically using a compassionate and understanding tone. Pi AI focuses on text input and output with an optional audio output feature. And with that audio output, you can actually choose from 8 different voices that you want to hear. And the audio output does sound fairly conversational with cadences of human speech. It's close to GPT-4 competencies, and it can conduct internet searches, adding to its informational capabilities. So Stephanie created a sample here of Pi AI, and I'll show that to you. So here is what Stephanie put in. That's wonderful. I'm feeling stressed and overworked right now, so it's nice to work with you. And then Pi said it's totally normal to feel stressed and overworked at times, especially with everything you've got on your plate. It sounds like you've been working hard, and I'm really glad I can help you out. I'm here to support you however I can. Sometimes just talking about how you're feeling can help. Would you like to tell me more about what's been causing you stress? And then we've got more input. So it's this back and forth of a conversation with some supportive tone from Pi AI, an empathetic tone.
Well, and while you're switching over, Amanda, I'll
Yeah.
chime in that I built that as a largely generic response based on my own life, of course, but to have kind of to see how it would respond to expression of stress and expression of emotion. And I was impressed with, again, how thoughtful and empathic its response was. And then one of the things with Pi AI that differs from the other tools is it has a default voice option, so you can enable voice so that it responds with both text and voice at the same time, which was remarkably soothing as an experience, even though this was a mock exercise for the purposes of demonstrating it today. It really does give more of a feeling with that emotional empathy of uh, almost having a person who was listening and responding to you. Remarkable.
Great, thank you. I've played around with it too. It's fun. So Goblin Tools is the next one, and this is an interesting addition specifically designed for neurodivergent users to support productivity. It's free on the web. It's available for a small fee on mobile. The key features are task management, which breaks down tasks into manageable steps, writing improvement tools like Formalizer and Judge, which help refine the tone and formality of written context or content. So for the magic to-do list, for example, you would add a new item and then you select the magic wand icon to break it down into multiple tasks. And then you can even break down each of those tasks into more discrete tasks and then break those down even further and so on and so on. With the formalizer, you can choose what tone you want the text to have and how strongly you want the text to come across. So you input your own text and then it'll adapt it for you based on those parameters. And then the judge will communicate what the text input comes across as and then suggest a response to that input. So for example, if you are a neurodivergent person who doesn't understand, or can't understand the tone of something, maybe you need it to explain that, so you can input that into Judge. It'll tell you what it comes across as and then suggest how you could respond to it. Microsoft CoPilot is now available to all NIU faculty, staff, and students. You can access it using your NIU account ID. It features commercial data protection, which ensures that user data and chats aren't used to train the AI. CoPilot accepts various input types. It can generate text, images, files, and it also conducts internet searches with source citations. Stephanie, did you have anything that you wanted to add about Microsoft CoPilot?
I was adding in the link, of course, in the chat for those who want to join. It's on the slide, but there you can click it more directly. I wanted to highlight that the commercial data protection, I think, is one of the key things that differentiates CoPilot and what makes it NIU supported as opposed to the others. That's not to say that NIU endorses any of these tools or prevents you from using any of the others, but rather that your NIU credentials gives you access to them. So right now through O365, your NIU credentials give you access to Microsoft Copilot with that commercial data protection. And I still would be cautious about giving anything to Copilot that is protected data, like FERPA protected data, student names or grades, for example. But that commercial data protection does mean that anything you provide to the AI isn't used to train AI. It also does, unfortunately, mean that unlike many of the tools where you can have an ongoing conversation, Copilot does open a new conversation each time you access it, and you're limited to 30 messages before you have to start a new conversation with fresh context. So there's the only thing I would add there is, again, there's a little bit of limitation to that protection, but at the same time, that protection is still really valuable. And then the provide sources for both Copilot, and I'll maybe harken back to GPT-4o, is different than when ChatGPT was first launched, and we would ask for it to generate a bibliography, a list of sources on a topic, and they were often completely made up articles. These are direct in-text links to the sources that it's found or a compilation of those sources. again, as direct links for both GPT-4o and Microsoft CoPilot, which lends a lot of credibility to the information, at least, that you are receiving from the AI, and the ability for you or your students to validate the source of that information and whether or not the source that it pulled from is valuable or not. And Ashley, so the data protection, does NIU have the ability to track and or see how we have used the tool as well? No. NIU has no visibility into your use of CoPilot, despite the fact that you're using your NIU credentials. Excellent questions. Thanks, Amanda.
Great. And the next tool that we'll talk about is Adobe Creative Cloud and Express, and these are also available to NIU faculty and students. And they now incorporate Adobe's Firefly generative AI features. So they include text-to-image generation, generative fill, content extension, audio editing across Adobe apps like Photoshop, Illustrator, and Premiere. A lot of fun to play around with, which I've done. And they have on their website a lot of training modules, and there's some micro-credentials that you can earn through Adobe Creative Cloud as well that give you experience with the different features. Anything that you wanted to add to that?
I was going to share a couple of links for this one. So you can access Adobe Creative Cloud and download any of the tools at, if you're an NIU faculty, staff, or student, at the link I'll put here in the chat. And then the one that's on the slide is really geared for faculty specifically, the seidel.niu.edu/Adobe, to learn more about using Adobe tools in your classroom, and what our recent designation as an Adobe Creative Campus means to us as an institution, and how we approach digital literacy across our courses. If you have not tried Adobe Express, I'll give you that direct URL too. When you're, for NIU faculty and staff, when you're working in Adobe Express, if it's your first time, once you've signed in with your NIU credentials, there'll be a try premium option that lets you send a request. Don't pay for it if you're an NIU faculty member, staff, or student. If you're told to pay for something, back out and go back to that very first link and follow those instructions. But Adobe Express has some really cool, really easy to use tools for generating images that can do wonders for helping either you or your students envision what, or visualize something, that a concept that you're working on, instead of having to create that manually. The AI can generate some alternatives for what that might look like. You can then, again, work on your prompting skills to revise and improve upon the images you've gotten. I see it, Natalie, you have your hand up. Did you want to ask something?
Yes, so sorry. Over the summer, I found this tool and it's amazing. I've been using it at home now that we're back. I was hoping, and I'm wondering, you may not know, do you know if we could have 2 logins? Because I'd like to have my work computer and my home computer, like, so I can do work in both places, but I don't know if NIU has a limit to Adobe, you know, because I'd have to log out of each one. Do you have any idea if we can put it onto 2 computers?
You can. 2 is actually the
Okay.
limit. So you can
2 is the limit.
download. You can
Thank you.
download Adobe Creative Cloud and any of the applications on up to 2 computers. You can sign in to Adobe Express or a few of the tools, like there's a Photoshop Express that you can use in the web browser. You can use that on as many computers as you sign in on, but only one simultaneously. So you couldn't be using it at work while someone at your home computer was signed in as you and working as well.
Wonderful.
But
thanks for that.
Yes,
Appreciate
absolutely.
it.
Any other questions before we move on?
The last thing I'll add about Adobe is, since this is a new partnership, there will be a lot more communication to come for faculty, staff, and students on using Adobe Creative Cloud. But we wanted to highlight it today because of the generative AI features that are embedded within the Adobe suite, some of which you might use standalone, like Express's text to image, but others that are just part of the workflow now of working with these tools, such as Photoshop, where you can just highlight an area of an image and ask for it to either generatively fill to add something, or crop and extend the edges of your image into the white space and ask it to fill in what the rest of that image might look like around it. All of those are kind of built into those native workflows, which is, I think, one of the things we're seeing more and more with generative AI is not only the use of those standalone tools like GPT-40 and Claude Sonnet, but the embedding of those tools within the other applications that we use.
Great, thank you. So last but not least, we have the Blackboard AI Design Assistant. It was piloted at NIU in the spring of 2024, and it'll be available to all NIU faculty this month. This tool assists in course design by suggesting prompts for assignments and discussions, creating rubrics, generating test questions, suggesting learning modules, creating images for course content. So you think of it and it can do it. All these tools represent cutting edge generative AI. Each offers unique capabilities to enhance creativity, productivity, learning. And as we continue to explore and integrate these technologies, we're opening up new possibilities for innovation in education and beyond. Anything that you would like to add about Blackboard AI Design Assistant? I think we have a workshop on that coming up too.
Yes, we'll have the link to register at the end of this. We're going to hold a workshop just on the AI Design Assistant in September. In any course at NIU, anyone with the instructor or TA role has access to the Blackboard AI Design Assistant to try out any of these capabilities. One thing I'll mention here, so this is a very niche tool compared to something like ChatGPT or GPT-40 that were very broad and open. This one is very narrowly targeted and tuned to specifically build things in Blackboard to make that easier for you. So it's not only about suggesting the content, but about building the structures so that you don't have to do all the clicks to do that as well. There are a lot of ways to use these tools. You have full control over whether or not you use what the AI has generated once it has generated something, and you have full control once it's been created to either remove it completely or edit it once it's in place. So for example, if you generate a block of 10 test questions, you can choose to use 4 of those, and you can further refine those 4 once you've done that, once you've added them to the course before students ever see them. So you're fully in control, but this helps to not only provide some inspiration for content, but also make that building process more efficient for you. The other thing that was released this summer, by the way, for anyone who might teach in another language, is the Blackboard AI Design Assistant this summer released the ability for you to specify the language of the output that it generates. So you can prompt it in English, for example, and get output in Spanish for your quiz in your Spanish course, if that was what you wanted to do. More features are expected and are coming. We'll have more conversations and you'll hear more as those become available.
Great, and that leads into our next topic, which is developing a generative AI course policy. And this is really going to just depend on, what level you want to have these course policies, the ability for students to use AI, interact with AI. So there's 3 different approaches to AI that we've kind of outlined here. Prohibiting, redesigning, and integrating. Prohibiting bans the use of AI for assessments. That may be your preference. Some of the benefits of that is the goal is to maintain academic integrity with that. It also will encourage the development of critical thinking, ensuring accurate evaluation of students' work, promoting their original thought, promoting or preparing students for environments where AI is not available to them. And it may also promote creativity. Some of the drawbacks is that it may limit their technological literacy. It's also very challenging to enforce. And, those AI detection programs are not, not accurate. And there are some equity issues with them as well. For example, flagging non-native speakers of English more so than native speakers. It may also not reflect real-world practices in the workplace, may disadvantage students with disabilities or language barriers, and it may also stifle innovation. Redesign involves revising assessments to promote authentic work that AI can't replicate easily. So this encourages higher order thinking, develops valuable skills like solving complex problems or thinking creatively. It helps us maintain academic integrity, promotes engagement for students, and improves information literacy, and it helps build resilience and adaptability for students. Some of the drawbacks to redesign is that it takes a lot of time and effort to design. It potentially could take more time to grade and provide feedback. There may be scalability challenges, for example, with larger classes. It may disadvantage some students, and AI continues to evolve. So the assessments that you create today that AI can't replicate, AI may be able to replicate in the future. So there's kind of a moving target there, where you're going to have to constantly be reassessing what AI can do. And then finally, integrate. So this is incorporating AI intentionally in assessments. Some benefits are that it adapts learning to the technological realities that students will face in the workforce, promotes AI literacy, improves efficiency, teaches responsible AI use if it's implemented in that way, encourages critical thinking about AI outputs, and prepares students for evolving job markets. Some of the drawbacks, it may develop or have students develop an overdependence on AI. There are a lot of rapid changes to AI, so it might be difficult to keep up with those. And if we're going to ask students to integrate or incorporate AI into their work for our classes, we need to stay on top of what those changes are so that we know what we're asking our students to do. It might be harder to evaluate students' contributions versus AI contributions to assessments, potential for misuse. So students using AI in ways that we're not asking them to use it. It requires significant AI expertise on our part. And then there's also those ethical concerns that were talked about before by Stephanie, for example, the environmental impact of using AI. So we have a couple of links here. Examples of AI use statements are included in our syllabus toolkit. So we'll share that link with you. And then the sample policies for a number of universities and faculty are located at the AI toolkit. So I will show you a couple of examples, and you can see these examples. You can see the first example there, but the second example is actually my own AI policy. So this is from Temple University. It's the very first example when you go to the AI toolkit with the examples of the statements, the sample policies. So there's a section at the top where the use of generative AI tools is permitted for certain activities and then not permitted for other activities. And then you detail which activities you want to permit or prohibit the use of AI with. I also have, and I'll share the file actually with you in the chat here of my course policy. And I have kind of an extensive, lengthy course policy. I won't screen share it here, but you can take a look at the file. And I have a disclaimer at the top, which I include for a lot of policies in my classes that, these are my course policies. The policies might be different for other professors. So they need to check with their other professors for their policies on AI. So that's always at the top. Then I go into the limitations of generative AI. I talk about where generative AI tools is permitted for my course for certain activities, and then when it's not permitted. And then I also talk about the limitations of other AI tools like Grammarly, which has been around for a long time. And a lot of students like to use it. So, and I can tell when they've used it too. So I've included that policy as well, or those limitations as well, just to make them aware of, what they're using and what it can do and what it can't do. I also give information on citing ChatGPT, for example, in MLA style. We use MLA style. And then I also talk about at the very end how students can prove their innocence in a case of questions about cheating via AI. So things like keeping track of the changes in a Word document or a Google Doc so that they can prove that they did the work themselves, annotating their sources as they read, those kinds of active learning strategies. So feel free to steal any part that you find useful in my own policy.
Well, and Amanda, can I chime in really quickly
Yeah.
here for one thing, which is, you know, I've talked with a couple of different student-facing groups recently, this summer, in fact, and one of the things that they were looking for the most is, as they work with students, they said that the biggest challenge was not knowing what the policy was in any given course. So I think the biggest takeaway for any faculty coming back into the fall semester this year is to be specific and explicit about what your policy is, and when students can use it, can they always use it, can they never use it, making that really clear so that there's no question for your course, at least, of what those expectations are. Because it is going to differ course by course. It may differ for one person, for you, across two different courses that you teach, just based on the context and what students need to be doing in that course and how they demonstrate their learning in that course as well. So the number one, like, put it on a banner takeaway is have a policy and make it really clear to your students what that policy is.
All right, and then bring it over to you, Stephanie, on the
Yeah.
generative AI resources.
I want to run through a couple of these really quickly so that we can still have some time for Q&A, but we wanted to leave you with more ways to learn more. And so if you aren't quite sure how to get started with AI, if you're feeling a little bit behind the curve, my best recommendation is to try the AI Quick Start Guide. I put the link in the chat here. It's part of our AI toolkit. It actually comes from Western Kentucky University. We adapted it from their materials with gratitude for them releasing it open source. And it really provides, I think, a step-by-step walkthrough with some really good videos and approachable articles to get started with generative AI if it's something you've been staying away from. If you are ready to jump ahead a little bit, then I highly recommend the AI Hacks for Educators. So this is an ebook that was released, again, open source. Love Creative Commons licenses and open education resources. This AI Hacks for Educators is written by educators for educators and it's just loaded with different ways that you might use AI for your course design, for your teaching. Lots of examples in that book to take away from. So highly recommend it. If you're really interested in generative AI literacy, so I have another resource. I know we started with a framework for generative AI literacy, but there are multiple versions of this available as well. So I have another example of an AI literacy definition that I think would be really interesting for those of you who are looking at helping students understand and use generative AI in their coursework and further ahead into their career. Because we can't forget about faculty. We have an article on faculty well-being and its relation to ChatGPT adoption. I'll give you the TLDR, the too long didn't read, which is their study found that ChatGPT adoption correlated positively with faculty well-being insofar as the use was increasing productivity or increasing efficiency, most importantly, freeing up time for other tasks. However, you know, there's certainly a balance to not taking on too much and doing so in a healthy way. So definitely recommend that article if you're curious about the connection between ChatGPT use and faculty well-being. The Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania has done a lot of research as well on AI. So they have a webinar series. The recordings are all available on their website. They cover everything from AI and innovation, AI and well-being, AI and leadership. So a lot of good resources there for potentially for you, but also potentially for your students as you look at AI more broadly. And then again, to stay up to date from Western Michigan University, I put Kentucky on the slide. It is actually Michigan, so my apologies. They have an ongoing resources on AI guide that they maintain in a Google Doc. The link to this is also in our AI toolkit, but they have a wealth of resources that they're updating constantly as AI is featured in new news articles, in research articles. They'll mark anything that's new with a little star icon. So if you come back to it frequently, you can find those items that are new and noteworthy. So highly recommend their list for what's up to date, but also what's curated and what's relevant. So it's different than just using like a news catcher that can find all of the articles on AI. These are just the ones that they have read, reviewed, and found helpful. So again, highly recommend those. While we have a few minutes, we wanted to open up for Q&A, but while you're thinking of your questions, let's maybe, Amanda, jump to the last slide really quickly, because I want to point out that we have more workshops on AI coming up this year. The very next one will be Monday, September 9th on using the Blackboard AI Design Assistant. And then later in September, we're holding a workshop called Welcome to AI, which really is intended for those who are perhaps feeling intimidated or overwhelmed and don't know where to start with AI. So this one will walk through some of the basics of what generative AI is, how it works, and how to actually get started accessing and using a couple of these tools, with a focus as well on how to write a good prompt so that you can converse with the AI and ultimately get the results you're looking for. So you can scan either of those QR codes, or you can go to the URL scital.niu.edu/AI workshops, which I will also put in the chat. While we then go back to some Q&A. Any thoughts, questions, comments on AI as you head into the fall semester? You can come on mic, or you can use the text chat. Thank you, Shanti. Glad you appreciated it. Nicole, those workshops will probably be repeated at some point, but for now they will be recorded. Lynn, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, it's more of a comment. We're going to figure this out. It's going to be pretty messy for the next while, but my mother considered spell check to be cheating. And I'm old enough that in high school, if we used a 4-function calculator to check our slide rule, that was cheating. So the technology will push the ethics in this too, and we'll figure it out, but it's going to be messy.
Absolutely true. We are living in interesting times, as the proverb goes. And yes, we are all still working out what this means and where it will go. But I think the key and the reason that's why we started our session today with the frameworks is it's important to remember why we would be using tools like these or what our goals are in accomplishing them. And so as you're looking at your courses, thinking about the AI literacies that you're building and developing with your students, or your intention and orientation in how you're using AI, is a really important foundation to begin from, because teaching is still teaching, whether you're doing it or GPT-40 is doing that on trigonometry. So that logical process and the reasoning and all of the the empathy and feedback that you give to students is really where all of that heart lies.
Thanks, Stephanie and Amanda. This is Natalie again. I'm here because I've had 2 semesters where I have had students fail just because they're using complete ChatGPT, to answer discussion questions. And there's really, truly no way, Amanda, you're talking about integrating, and I'm like, I'm trying to integrate, but I teach a film class. It's about a film, and all they do is they put it into the chat GPT and it just spits out like how they feel about the film and the characters and the themes of the filming. It's impossible to keep them from it. I've thought a myriad of ways. I've talked to a billion colleagues about how to integrate, and we're all lost. So I look forward to continuing to learn from you all on like strategies. Like, here is a question on trigonometry, how to integrate, because they can just put it into ChatGPT and get the answer for even trigonometry. So we look forward to learning from you and getting more resources from you and seeing things come out in open access, to try and integrate it, to teach them, literacy, but not to plagiarize. It's a very slippery slope. So thanks for all you guys are doing to help us.
Thanks, Natalie. And it's not an easy answer. The integration piece, I think, is probably the most difficult of the approaches in terms of conceptualizing it, right? But the most important thing that I try to think about is, again, what am I trying to accomplish with this assessment and this activity, and how does AI fit or not fit into that? And am I using this assessment style or this type because I'm trying to see students thinking? And is that really giving me what I want to see? That usually involves breaking tasks down and scaffolding and asking students to explain their reasoning. But we'll never really know to what extent they are or are not using the AI, even if they're right in front of us sometimes. I want to quickly address Nicole's question: in what ways have staff benefited from AI? I haven't spoken much directly with advisors or student support offices, but I can tell you from my experience, I've used and benefited from AI quite a bit in drafting outlines when I need to write something or create a presentation or plan any sort of a project. I've gone to the AI tools to ask for it to create that outline of how do I get from A to B. Here's my goal, my goal, my role, and what I'm trying to, any context that plays into that, to get to something like an outline or a project plan. I've used it to revise drafts. I've used it occasionally to generate a draft, but more often to revise a draft or to turn my bullet points into a draft. And I know there are ways as well that particularly student-facing advisors or those who have to craft very delicately worded emails might use the tools similar to Goblin Tools to ask for feedback on tone and interpretation, and to help align those a little bit more carefully. I'd love to know of more examples if anyone else has used AI in a way that has improved your productivity. Amanda, any examples from you?
Used it in a lot of the same ways that you have, and then I've also used it in my teaching too. So I'll give it my assignment prompt and ask it to create a grading rubric for my assignment prompt. And it's helpful with that. Obviously, I have to go through and tweak things and revise it. So I never accept anything that AI just gives me. I always have to go in and revise things. I've asked it to compile some resources for me and then had to check and make sure that they were real. 50-50. Some were convincing. And then some just, I asked it to put the resources in like AP a format or whatever, and some of them were just completely made up. But that's what the important thing is to communicate to students, is not everything that AI gives you is going to be usable or accurate, or so you still have to do the work of checking to make sure that it is.
And Nicole, I like your example of taking something that is perhaps longer prose and turning that into bulleted notes, or extracting next steps and takeaways out of that information. That's great. We are, of course, at the end of our hour, so I want to thank everyone for being here. If anyone has more questions they'd like to continue the conversation, I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes. As well as, you can always reach us and schedule a meeting one-on-one at citl.nau.edu/conversations if you're looking for more follow-up on how you might incorporate AI in your teaching. But thank you so much for being here.
And Shanti, I will send out a copy of the recording along with all of the links that were shared here today in a follow-up email to everyone who attended the session live. The recording is usually posted to our CITL YouTube page.
Thank you so much.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Bye, Shanti.